So before we move on to the next section of Chapter 6 of The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, Practical Techniques and Mental Healings by Joseph Murphy, I thought I would address something that, I touch upon from time to time, but I really haven't touched upon while we've been going through this chapter. And an intelligent commenter who often leaves comments, pointed this out. So I thought I would mention it. And we'll see. We might not even get to the next section because this is kind of a worthwhile point for me to at least discuss briefly. I even wrote down some chicken scrawl here with some notes. When I do that, God knows what's going to happen. So one reason that I prefer Emile Coué, to most of these more spiritual sounding law of attraction, law of assumption, law of bedumtion gumption teachers, is that Coué, he's using psychological language and he's not ascribing like magical spiritual powers to this stuff happening. He says this is part of just how your body and your imagination and the world works. There's these capabilities we have, which we don't really understand, which can heal us. Now, a lot of more spiritual sounding new thought teachers who are into this stuff, which is the vast majority of law of attraction stuff. The vast majority of law of attraction stuff is not like Coué, where it's very psychologically practical and it just sounds very psychological, right? And most new thought law of attraction stuff is much more like religious. Like basically it can be summed up in like what Murphy wrote in the last section when he was talking about the argumentative method, where Murphy says you explain to the sick person that the basis of all healing is a change of belief. Now Murphy says there, and I don't know how literally he means this, but he says the basis of all healing is a change of belief. It's very, very, very easy to argue against that all healing is that basis. I mean, the point that Murphy often makes is that life is life-giving, right? And the body is very, very capable of healing itself. But is all healing, literally all healing, just based on belief? I personally would say absolutely fucking not. Okay? If you know me, if you know my stuff, if you're familiar with, my channel, let alone my books or, the podcast, you would expect me to say that. I think that it is incredibly stupid to take that extreme position that this is all mental and that, if you clear up your beliefs, you'll be automatically healed of anything. And like, the commenter said, like, how about kids with cancer? Is that because of false beliefs, that they have cancer? Or like, there was that famous Rhonda Byrne secret lady, then there's the tsunami, and she said, well, the tsunami victims, they must have thought it was going to happen to them or something along those lines. I might be butchering that, but that's a famous story. It's this idea that like, you create your own reality, you create your own thinking and your own disease. I'm strongly opposed to that. I think that we have more imaginative control over our bodies than we admit. Far more imaginative control over our bodies than we are aware of usually. But that doesn't mean that we're causing ourselves to have cancer or have children have cancer or people dying and people being in pain and unable to heal themselves. I just think that's so stupid. But, unfortunately, this whole, like Christian Science, Mary Baker Eddy, I mean, that's in New Thought, I mean, that's what we hear a lot of. It's all mental. It's all mental. If you clear your belief system, if you realize God, you'll be healed. The body is just a body. It has an intelligence of its own. We did a recent podcast episode, I'll link it above, talking about the intelligence of the body, talking about some of the stuff that Yuji Krishnamurti, who's one of my favorite teachers, what he's talking about how intelligent the body is. And Yuji also talks all about how, the body is life-giving. It wants to serve you. But the body's going to go one day. It's going to go. And it's, you have to remember all these saints and sages, they die. Joseph Murphy died. He wasn't able to heal himself and he died, and great saints like, Ramana, he died of cancer. A lot of these Indian saints, they die of cancer, even though they're supposedly enlightened. The body's going to go. And that's like what Yuji said too. He said, your body is going to heal itself if it can, and if you allow it to, it's very capable of healing itself in amazing ways. And that's what Coué always pointed out. But it's a body. And, bodies live and bodies die. But most of the time, our bodies are life-giving. And so we're able to improve our health if we're able to align our imagination positively with what we want. And usually we think negatively about our health situation. If we can start to think positively instead, which is what Coué is all about, our life will get better and our body will probably, feel better. Again, this is why I always talk about Coué. And once we get done with this freaking chapter, which we're slowly going through, and it's a great chapter, we're probably going to have to just hit back with some more Coué, because it just is going to be more practical sounding than this kind of spiritual stuff we're talking about now. I mean, Murphy doesn't use nearly as much spiritual language as a lot of these New Thought teachers, but still it's spiritual sounding. And it can confuse us, and it can make us feel guilty and full of shame that we're unable to heal ourselves and that it's our fault. Even if that's just inadvertent, it still can happen very, very easily. This is just all worth mentioning. Again, this is why this channel exists, is to kind of debunk these ideas that, like, it's all mental, you can heal yourself of anything by the right belief. I mean, maybe that's possible. Maybe if you're a master, if you're a Christic master, you can heal yourself. But it's usually the body dies, the body goes, and it is interesting to think about a lot of these New Thought and spiritual sounding teachers. Like, Neville died in his late 60s. Murphy, he lasted till he was, I think, 81 or something like that. Joel Goldsmith, another one of those, it's mental, it's by, he died in, I think, his 70s. People die, man. Everybody dies. Abdullah supposedly lived to 115 or something like that. Might be true, but, to say like, oh yeah, kids have cancer, or children die, or people who are in a lot of pain who are doing their best to heal themselves, it's just because of their belief system. Oof. That's some ugly, like, puritanical, judgmental shit. What else did I write down? Yeah, we're not going to get to this next section today because this is already a 7-minute video. Oh yeah, let me close this section. Well, but two things. So first of all, that doesn't take away from the brilliance of this chapter and the brilliance of Joseph Murphy, what he's saying, okay? Without question, he's pointing out hugely important things. And if you can explain to the sick person that the basis of all healing is a change of belief, if they buy into that, they're going to probably feel better. Even if they have a terminal disease or still are sick. I did another video recently about Coué, how, the mental element of pain in a disease grafts itself on the physical element. So like the physical element might be a 1. Like you might have a very sore knee, for instance. But then you mentally start thinking about how much your knee hurts, and before you know it, you're in a wheelchair. So from the 1, you start thinking about how much it hurts, and before you know you're in a wheelchair, you put 10 times, 20 times, 100 times the amount of pain into your body by thinking about it imaginatively so negatively. That's an extreme example. But that's kind of what we do. We graft a mental element onto our physical pain, which makes it much worse. Our pain level might be at like a 3, and mentally, because we obsess about it negatively, we make it like an 8 or 9 a lot of the time, So yeah, the story I'll end with that I wrote down is kind of interesting. One of the best examples I can think of my own life of realizing how life-giving our body is and how intelligent our body is, and how it wants us to live is I have a funny story. I was in college, I was probably 21, and I actually hadn't done psychedelics since high school, I don't think. And I took a small amount of mushrooms with my friends. And I remember we were watching the movie Young Guns, and, it's like, this is what happens with mushrooms for a lot of people. It's like, this stuff's, this is pretty mild. And then a half an hour later, it's like, oh man, I am fucked up, the screen comes at you. Anyway, I remember retreating into my room, tripping, and fucking tripping. And I hadn't I hadn't done psychedelics in a long time, in several years at least. And yeah, I remember just being like, first of all, very scared, right? Like this visual imagery, crazy visualization imagery coming at me, And that's why, a lot of people who talk about visualization and stuff, like who are into Neville, who are like, you can do this, 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 this. I did a survey on Reddit, actually. I was like, how many of you have actually done psychedelics? And only about less than half of people who are on the Neville Reddit who responded to that survey. It was a big survey. There's like 1,000 people who responded. More than half said they'd never done psychedelics. People who are talking about all this crazy visualization stuff who've never done psychedelics, I'm not advocating you do psychedelics at all, but psychedelics shows you something about visualization, for good and bad. So for me, I usually have terrible trips. I mean, they're horrific. This one wasn't very different from that. It was pretty horrific. And then I reached a point of incredible lucidity, clarity all of a sudden. I realized everything was just a hallucination. And there was this feeling of incredible relief and release. Like we talk about the peace that passeth understanding, right? It's like, oh my gosh. And I was so joyful. I remember I had like a transistor radio. I remember I broke the transistor, the rod that we used to, like I broke that off. I remember I was biting the rug biting the rug just in joy. It was nothing matters. There was like like a French door with the small little glass windows. I smashed a couple of those windows. I was just like joyful. And then I think I felt, the body wanted to sleep. So like I fell asleep and I woke up. And I went to the bathroom. I looked in the bathroom mirror. I had like smeared blood on my face. But like I realized at that experience, like as it was happening, like I could have gone then. I could have died there very easily because I realized nothing was real. Nothing was real. All our suffering is a hallucination. And it was so much joy to just realize that relief. It's like, oh my God, I'm free. But then, I was acting like I was free and just the release, like breaking stuff, being like, it doesn't matter, I'm free. I'm not I, everything's God, I'm free. But then the body pulled me back in. That's that life-giving principle too, that self-survival mechanism. Something kicks in, this instinctual thing kicks in to help you survive. So that's an extreme example, and that's one reason a lot of you probably should not do psychedelics. But it just goes to show you how life-giving and how much the body is wired to have you survive and thrive. So yeah, fuck all that bizarre, mentally all disease is just false belief. That's horseshit as far as I'm concerned. But a lot of our pain and health issues we have in our life, as well as mental issues we have, are just false projected negative imaginings. And if we can wipe that stuff off and think more positively, think of, health, wealth, peace, prosperity, joy, the stuff that Murphy always comes back to, our life improves. Okay? I hope that was helpful. Just to clarify, when I say if you have questions, please contact me at info@radicalcounselor.com or on my radicalcounselor.com website. I still do look at comments sometimes on YouTube, but I do not respond to them. If you have a real question or you want help and want counseling and coaching, go to radicalcounselor.com. Do not ask me a question on YouTube because, I might not see it, and I don't respond to comments on YouTube. All right, so have a good one, and we'll probably get back to the next technique or method of Murphy's in the next video. Enjoy.